My name is Sarah Chin, I'm 28, and 3 weeks ago I discovered that my entire family had systematically excluded me from my grandmother's will reading because they labeled me ungrateful. What they didn't know was that Grandma Rose had been planning something entirely different for months before her death, something that would expose every lie, every betrayal, and every assumption they'd made about family loyalty. The lawyer's phone call changed everything I thought I knew about my place in this family. Before we dive into this wild ride of family drama and sweet justice, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? If you're ready for a story about family betrayal that'll make your jaw drop, smash that like button and hit subscribe because trust me, you're going to want to see how this revenge unfolds. The twists in this family drama will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about blood being thicker than water. Growing up in the Chin family meant understanding your place in a carefully constructed hierarchy where my older brother Marcus was the undisputed golden child, and I was the perpetual disappointment. From the moment Marcus graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law and married his college sweetheart Jennifer, a doctor from another prominent Chinese-American family, he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Every family gathering became a celebration of Marcus's achievements, his promotion to partner at his law firm, his beautiful colonial house in the suburbs, and eventually the birth of their twin boys. I, on the other hand, chose a different path that scandalized my traditional family. After college, I became a social worker specializing in helping undocumented immigrants navigate the legal system. My parents saw this as throwing away my expensive education to help people who shouldn't be here anyway, as my father once cruelly put it during a family dinner. When I moved in with my girlfriend Emma 2 years ago, the family's disappointment reached new heights. My mother stopped including us in family photos, and my father began introducing me as our daughter who works for the government, instead of acknowledging what I actually did. But Grandma Rose was different. She was the matriarch who'd immigrated from Taiwan in 1962 with nothing but determination and a suitcase. She'd built a successful restaurant empire from scratch, working 18-hour days while raising 4 children as a single mother after my grandfather died young. Rose understood struggle, sacrifice, and the value of helping others. She never judged my career choice or my relationship with Emma. In fact, she was the only family member who insisted Emma be included in family events, often calling her my other granddaughter. The rest of the family barely tolerated Rose's acceptance of my lifestyle. During last year's Chinese New Year dinner, my Aunt Linda made several passive-aggressive comments about how some people were bringing shame to the family name. My cousin David, Marcus's best man and fellow lawyer, would regularly make jokes about my bleeding heart phase that everyone laughed at except Rose and me. The family had established a clear narrative. Marcus was the success story who honored our heritage and brought prestige to the Chin name, while I was the rebellious disappointment who'd lost her way. This dynamic became even more pronounced after Rose's first heart attack last spring. Suddenly, everyone became deeply concerned about her well-being and her substantial assets. Marcus started visiting every weekend with Jennifer and the twins, bringing expensive gifts and offering to help manage Rose's finances. My parents began pressuring Rose to move to an assisted living facility near Marcus's house for her own safety. My Aunt Linda started dropping hints about how Rose's restaurants needed proper business management from someone with corporate experience. I continued my regular Tuesday evening dinners with Rose, the same tradition we'd maintained for 3 years. We'd cook together, share stories about her immigration journey, and she'd tell me about the challenges she faced building her business in a country where she barely spoke the language. These intimate moments revealed a woman far sharper and more observant than anyone in the family realized. Rose saw through everyone's sudden interest in her welfare, and she began sharing her growing concerns about certain family members' true motivations. The turning point came 6 months before Rose's death when she suffered her second, more serious heart attack. As she recovered in the hospital, I noticed how different family members positioned themselves around her bedside. Marcus brought his laptop to help organize her affairs, while Linda arrived with a stack of brochures for expensive senior communities. My parents discussed selling Rose's original restaurant, the one that held all her memories, to simplify her portfolio. Everyone seemed to be preparing for Rose's eventual death while she was still very much alive and mentally sharp. During one of my solo visits, Rose grabbed my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Sarah, they think I'm just a foolish old woman who doesn't see what's happening. But I see everything. I've been watching and I've been planning." Her eyes held a gleam that reminded me of the young woman who'd conquered America with nothing but ambition and resilience. "Promise me you'll trust the process, no matter how bad things look." I had no idea then what she meant by the process, but I promised anyway. Rose squeezed my hand and smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd just put the final piece of a complex puzzle into place. Looking back now, I realize that conversation was the beginning of the most elaborate and brilliant revenge plot I've ever witnessed. Rose's death came unexpectedly on a Tuesday morning in late October, just 3 days after our last dinner together. I was at work helping a family navigate their asylum application when my mother called, her voice strangely flat as she delivered the news. Rose passed peacefully in her sleep. The funeral arrangements are being handled by Marcus and the family. We'll let you know the details. The funeral planning process revealed just how deeply I'd been relegated to outsider status. Marcus took charge of everything, consulting with Jennifer, my parents, and Linda about every decision while treating me like a distant relative who needed to be informed rather than consulted. When I offered to speak at the service about Rose's immigration story and her impact on the community she served through her restaurants, Marcus dismissed the idea immediately. "We want to keep the tone appropriate and focused on family," he said, as if my relationship with Rose somehow didn't qualify as family. Jennifer, ever the diplomatic doctor's wife, suggested I could help with logistics instead, arranging flowers, coordinating with the caterers, basically the grunt work while the real family made the important decisions. When I asked about Rose's final wishes, having heard her express specific preferences during our dinners, my father cut me off entirely. Rose was confused toward the end. "We're handling things properly." But Rose hadn't been confused at all. She'd been devastatingly clear about everything, including her growing awareness of how the family viewed me versus Marcus. During our final dinner, she'd mentioned updating her will again and meeting with her lawyer, Mr. Peterson, the same attorney who'd handled her business affairs for 20 years. She'd seemed excited about something, though she'd been cryptically vague about the details. The funeral itself was a painful demonstration of family politics. Marcus delivered a eulogy that painted Rose as a simple immigrant grandmother who'd worked hard to provide for her family's success, meaning his success. He barely mentioned her business acumen, her community involvement, or her fierce independence. My parents spoke about her dedication to traditional family values, which felt like a direct rebuke of my life choices. Linda shared memories that consistently centered around Rose's pride in Marcus's achievements and her concerns about keeping the family together through challenging times. When I finally stood to speak, sharing stories about Rose's weekly dinners with elderly community members who had no family, her secret donations to immigration legal aid organizations, and her fierce advocacy for her restaurant workers' rights, the family's reaction was ice cold. Marcus visibly rolled his eyes, Jennifer stared at her hands, and my parents looked embarrassed. Only Emma, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand in support. After the service, the family's exclusion became even more blatant. At the reception, conversations stopped when I approached, and people seemed to be discussing family matters that apparently didn't include me. When I overheard Marcus telling someone about the will reading scheduled for the following week, I asked when and where it would take place. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother finally spoke up, her voice carefully controlled. "Sarah, the will reading is for immediate family members who were actively involved in Rose's care during her final years. Given your distance from family responsibilities and your attitude toward our values, we felt it would be best if you weren't present for what will likely be difficult financial discussions." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Distance from family responsibilities? I had dinner with her every Tuesday for 3 years. I was the one who drove her to doctor's appointments when everyone else was too busy. I helped her write letters to her friends back in Taiwan. You helped her with your political activism, Linda interjected sharply, filling her head with ideas about supporting people who don't belong here. That's not the same as caring for family. Marcus stepped forward, his lawyer's voice smooth and condescending. Look, Sarah, we know this is emotional, but Rose's estate is complex. There are business assets, property holdings, and family heirlooms that require careful handling. Your lifestyle choices have made it clear that you're not invested in preserving what Rose built for future generations of the Chin family. The message was crystal clear. My relationship with Emma, my career helping immigrants, and my refusal to conform to their expectations had officially disqualified me from being considered real family. I was too ungrateful, too rebellious, too different to be trusted with Rose's legacy. As I left the reception with Emma, fighting back tears of hurt and rage, I had no idea that Rose had anticipated this exact scenario. I couldn't have imagined that the woman who'd built an empire from nothing had spent her final months orchestrating the most spectacular comeuppance my family would ever experience. The will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. in Mr. Peterson's downtown office. Marcus had already started making plans for managing Rose's restaurants. My parents were discussing which pieces of Rose's jewelry would go to Jennifer, and Linda was researching the market value of Rose's properties. None of them knew that Mr. Peterson had very specific instructions about what to do if any family member was excluded from the will reading. None of them realized that Rose had been 3 steps ahead of their planning all along. The call came on Wednesday evening, exactly 24 hours before the scheduled will reading I'd been banned from attending. I was curled up on the couch with Emma, trying to distract myself with a mindless Netflix show and failing miserably to stop thinking about how thoroughly my family had cut me out. When my phone rang and displayed an unknown number, I almost didn't answer. Miss Chin? This is Robert Peterson from Peterson, Martinez and Associates. I was your grandmother's attorney. His voice was formal, but carried an underlying urgency that made me sit up straight immediately. Mr. Peterson, hello. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it to tomorrow's reading. My family felt it would be best if... Miss Chin, he interrupted gently, that's exactly why I'm calling. I understand there's been some miscommunication about your grandmother's final wishes. Would it be possible for you to come to my office tonight? There are some documents your grandmother specifically instructed me to share with you before tomorrow's reading. My heart started pounding. Documents? What kind of documents? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Your grandmother was very specific about the timing and circumstances under which certain information should be revealed. Based on what's happened with tomorrow's arrangements, it appears those circumstances have been met. The drive to Mr. Peterson's office felt surreal. Emma insisted on coming with me, sensing that whatever was about to happen would be significant. The law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, with Mr. Peterson's corner office overlooking the city lights. He was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded me somehow of Rose herself. Please, both of you, sit down, he said, gesturing to the leather chairs across from his massive mahogany desk. Miss Chin, your grandmother spoke about you often during our meetings over the past year. She was extremely proud of your work and your commitment to helping others, though she was deeply concerned about your family's treatment of you. He opened a thick file folder and pulled out several documents. Rose came to me 8 months ago with some very specific instructions. She'd been watching certain family dynamics closely and wanted to ensure that her final wishes would be carried out exactly as she intended, regardless of what other family members might prefer. My hands were shaking as he slid the first document across the desk. It was a letter in Rose's distinctive handwriting, addressed to me and dated just 2 weeks before her death. My dearest Sarah, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means my family has done exactly what I feared they would do. They have excluded you from the will reading because they believe you are ungrateful and undeserving of the Chin family legacy. They could not be more wrong. I looked up at Mr. Peterson, whose expression was carefully neutral. There's more, he said quietly. The letter continued, I have spent the past year watching how each family member has responded to my declining health. I have seen Marcus's calculations about my business assets, your parents' assumptions about my property, and Linda's research into selling my restaurants. I have watched them position themselves like vultures around my hospital bed, each one convinced they know what's best for the legacy I built with my own hands. My vision blurred with tears, but I kept reading. But I have also watched you, my dear granddaughter. I have seen you drive elderly Mrs. Kim to her immigration hearings. I have watched you work 16-hour days to help families stay together. I have seen you choose love over family approval and principle over convenience. You are not ungrateful, Sarah. You are the only one who truly understands what I tried to build, not just wealth, but a foundation for helping others rise. Mr. Peterson slid another document across the desk. This is your grandmother's actual will, Sarah. Not the version that will be read tomorrow, but her final will, executed 3 months ago. I stared at the legal document, struggling to process what I was seeing. Emma leaned over to read with me, her sharp intake of breath confirming that I wasn't misunderstanding the words on the page. Rose had left me everything. Not just a portion, not just a token bequest, everything. The restaurants, the properties, the investment accounts, even her personal jewelry. The document outlined a plan for transitioning ownership of the restaurant business to me over the course of 6 months, with detailed instructions for maintaining employees' jobs and continuing the community outreach programs Rose had quietly funded for years. But how is this possible? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What about tomorrow's reading? What will happen to Marcus and my parents? Mr. Peterson's expression grew more serious. Your grandmother was very strategic about this, Sarah. The document that will be read tomorrow is her previous will from 18 months ago, which leaves most of her estate to Marcus with smaller bequests to other family members. She instructed me to proceed with that reading as planned, but only if you are excluded from the process. I don't understand. Your grandmother wanted to test something, Mr. Peterson explained. She wanted to see if your family would include you naturally in her final arrangements, treating you as an equal member of the family despite their disapproval of your choices. If they had included you in the will reading, I was instructed to destroy this final will and proceed with the earlier version that favors Marcus. The brilliant cruelty of Rose's plan began to sink in. She'd given my family every opportunity to prove their love was unconditional, every chance to demonstrate that family meant more than conformity and approval. Their decision to exclude me had been their own choice, and it had triggered consequences they never could have imagined. There's one more thing, Mr. Peterson said, sliding a final document across the desk. Your grandmother recorded a video message for you, to be played only if these specific circumstances occurred. She also recorded a separate message for tomorrow's will reading, which I'm instructed to play regardless of who attends. Mr. Peterson turned his computer monitor toward us and clicked play on a video file labeled, "For Sarah, Final Instructions." Rose's face filled the screen, looking more vibrant and determined than I'd seen her in months. She was sitting in her favorite chair in her living room, the same spot where we'd shared countless conversations over tea. "My darling Sarah," Rose's recorded voice began, "if you are watching this, it means your family has shown their true colors by excluding you from my will reading. I am not surprised, but I am deeply disappointed in them and deeply proud of you." She paused, her eyes looking directly into the camera with the intensity that had made her such a formidable businesswoman. "I want you to understand why I structured things this way. For the past year, I have watched our family treat you like an outsider because you chose compassion over comfort, love over tradition, and helping others over accumulating wealth. They called you ungrateful, but I saw something entirely different." Rose shifted forward in her chair, her voice growing stronger. "I saw a young woman who drove Mrs. Kim to her citizenship ceremony because her own family was too busy. I saw someone who spent her Christmas bonus on legal fees for the Hernandez family's asylum case. I saw my granddaughter choose to help undocumented restaurant workers understand their rights, even when it made your Uncle David uncomfortable at family gatherings." Tears were streaming down my face as Rose continued. "Your brother Marcus makes more in a month than you make in a year, yet you were the one who quietly paid for my prescription medications when Medicare didn't cover them completely. Your parents live in that beautiful house I helped them buy, yet you were the one who showed up every Tuesday to make sure I wasn't lonely." The video shifted to Rose standing in her kitchen, the heart of her original restaurant. "This empire I built, these restaurants, these properties, these investments, They were never meant to be trophies for the family member who looked most successful on paper. They were meant to continue the work of lifting others up, the same way America lifted me up when I arrived with nothing. She moved to the window overlooking the street where her first restaurant still operated. Marcus sees these businesses as assets to be optimized for maximum profit. Your parents see them as security for their retirement. Linda sees them as prestigious additions to the family portfolio. But you, Sarah, you see them, as I always intended, as foundations for building community and helping people who are struggling to find their place in this country. Rose turned back to the camera, and I could see the tears in her eyes. I am giving you everything, my dear granddaughter, not because you are my favorite, but because you are the only one who will honor what I actually built instead of just what it's worth. The restaurants will continue to employ immigrants and give them opportunities to grow. The properties will continue to house families who need affordable places to live. The investments will continue to fund scholarships and legal aid programs. Now we could see her moving to her desk, picking up legal documents and photographs. But more than that, Sarah, I am giving you the power to show your family what real gratitude looks like. They have spent years telling you that you don't appreciate family, that you don't understand loyalty, that you don't deserve to be part of the Chin legacy. Tomorrow, they will learn exactly how wrong they were. The camera captured Rose's smile, the same mischievous expression I remembered from childhood when she was planning something elaborate. Mr. Peterson has very specific instructions for tomorrow's will reading. The family that excluded you will hear my earlier will first, the one that gives Marcus the majority of my estate. They will celebrate their victory and feel justified in their treatment of you. And then, Mr. Peterson will play another video message where I will explain exactly why their behavior has cost them everything. I realized we were getting to the heart of Rose's revenge plan, and it was more sophisticated than anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about forcing my family to confront their own values and choices in the most dramatic way possible. Your family made this about worthiness, about who deserves the Chin family legacy, Rose continued. They decided that your work helping immigrants makes you ungrateful, that your relationship with Emma makes you unworthy, that your refusal to prioritize money over people disqualifies you from being considered real family. Tomorrow, they will learn that I was evaluating their worthiness too, and they have failed spectacularly. The video showed Rose moving back to her chair, her expression growing more serious. Sarah, I need you to understand that this is not about punishing them for being different from you. This is about consequences for cruelty. They didn't just disagree with your choices, they systematically excluded you from family events, dismissed your achievements, and treated your girlfriend like she was invisible. They made you feel like you had to earn your place in this family while taking their own places for granted. Rose's voice cracked slightly with emotion. When I was dying in that hospital, Marcus was calculating my net worth on his laptop. Your parents were planning how to divide my jewelry. Linda was researching real estate values. But you were holding my hand and asking if I was scared, if there was anything you could do to make me more comfortable. You were treating me like a person, not an asset. The video shifted to a montage of photographs Rose had compiled, pictures of me at family events where I was clearly being excluded from group conversations, photos of family dinners where I was seated at the far end of the table, images from Marcus's wedding where I was pushed to the edge of family pictures. I hadn't realized Rose had been documenting the pattern of exclusion so carefully. These images tell the story your family doesn't want to acknowledge, Rose's voice narrated over the photos. They show a young woman being systematically marginalized for refusing to conform, while still showing up, still participating, still trying to be part of a family that had already decided she didn't belong. The video returned to Rose in her chair, but now she looked tired, more fragile. Tomorrow will be difficult for everyone, Sarah. Your family will be shocked, hurt, and probably very angry. They will accuse you of manipulating me, of somehow influencing my decisions. They will not accept responsibility for their own choices that led to this outcome. Rose leaned forward one final time, her voice firm despite her physical frailty. But I need you to remember that this inheritance comes with a responsibility. You are now the steward of everything I built, and I trust you to use these resources to continue lifting others up. Hire more immigrants in the restaurants. Create more affordable housing in the properties. Fund more legal aid and scholarship programs. Show your family what gratitude actually looks like by being grateful on behalf of people who truly need help. The video ended with Rose looking directly into the camera, her voice soft but determined. Tomorrow, the family that called you ungrateful will discover that I found them unworthy. And you, my dear granddaughter, will finally have the resources to do the work you were born to do, without anyone questioning whether you deserve the opportunity. Mr. Peterson paused the video and looked at me across his desk. Sarah, I need to ask you directly, do you accept this inheritance and all the responsibilities that come with it? Thursday arrived gray and drizzling, as if the weather itself understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. I spent the morning in a surreal state of nervous anticipation, barely able to focus on anything except the approaching 2 p.m. appointment that would change everything. Emma took the day off work to be with me, understanding instinctively that I would need support for whatever was coming. Mr. Peterson had been clear about the timeline. The family would gather first and hear the reading of Rose's previous will, which heavily favored Marcus. Only after they'd processed that information and presumably celebrated their vindication would he reveal the existence of the newer will and play Rose's final video message for them. I would arrive at 3:30 p.m., after the initial shock had settled, to meet with my family and Mr. Peterson together. Are you sure you're ready for this? Emma asked as we sat in the parking garage beneath Mr. Peterson's building, watching the clock tick toward 3:25 p.m. I wasn't sure of anything except that Rose had planned this moment carefully, and I owed it to her memory to see it through. She was brilliant, Em. She gave them every chance to include me naturally, and when they chose exclusion instead, she made sure there would be consequences. I can't back down from that now. We rode the elevator to the 15th floor in silence, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Emma could hear it. The receptionist, clearly briefed on the situation's sensitivity, directed us to a small conference room adjacent to Mr. Peterson's office. Through the glass walls, I could see into the main conference room where my family was gathered. The scene was not what I had expected. Marcus sat at the head of the long conference table, his usually perfect composure completely shattered. His face was pale, his tie loosened, and his hands were clasped so tightly in front of him that his knuckles had turned white. Jennifer sat beside him, her medical training apparently inadequate for managing this kind of shock, staring blankly at the table's surface. My parents looked smaller somehow, huddled together on one side of the table with expressions of complete bewilderment. My father kept removing and cleaning his glasses, a nervous habit from my childhood that surfaced during moments of extreme stress. My mother's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the fact that she'd been crying. Linda appeared to be in full crisis management mode, pacing behind her chair while gesturing animatedly and clearly trying to formulate some kind of legal challenge or explanation. Her husband sat quietly, looking like he wished he could disappear entirely from whatever family drama was unfolding. Mr. Peterson stood at the front of the room with the calm authority of someone who'd delivered shocking news many times before. He was speaking, though I couldn't hear the words through the glass, and I could see a large monitor displaying what I assumed was Rose's video message for them. The door to our small conference room opened, and Mr. Peterson stepped inside. His expression was carefully neutral, but I caught a hint of something that might have been admiration in his eyes. How did they take it? I asked immediately. About as well as your grandmother predicted, he replied, settling into a chair across from us. The initial will reading went exactly as expected. Marcus was pleased to inherit the majority of the estate. Your parents were satisfied with their bequests, and Linda seemed particularly happy about the jewelry allocation. There was definitely a sense of validation in the room. They felt justified in their decision to exclude you. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Then I informed them that there was a more recent will, executed just 3 months ago, that superseded everything they'd just heard. The reaction was dramatic. What did Rose say in her video message to them? Mr. Peterson's expression grew more serious. Your grandmother was very direct about her observations of their behavior over the past year. She detailed specific examples of their exclusion of you, their assumptions about your character, and their treatment of Emma. She explained her testing process, how she gave them multiple opportunities to include you naturally, and how their choice to exclude you from the will reading was the final proof she needed of their true priorities. Through the glass wall, I could see Marcus suddenly stand up and begin pacing, his lawyer's mind presumably trying to process legal options for challenging what he'd just learned. Rose also addressed their likely accusations about undue influence, Mr. Peterson continued. She presented a detailed timeline of her decision-making process, complete with documentation of her mental competency evaluations and witness statements from her doctors. She was extremely thorough in protecting the integrity of her final wishes. Emma squeezed my hand. What happens now? Now, we all meet together so you can see their reactions firsthand and discuss the transition process. Sarah, your grandmother was very specific that you should witness your family's response to learning about their misjudgment. She felt it was important for your own closure and for their accountability. As we prepared to enter the main conference room, Mr. Peterson offered one final piece of preparation. Your grandmother predicted that Marcus would immediately threaten legal action, your parents would express bewilderment and hurt feelings, and Linda would try to negotiate some kind of compromise. She recorded specific responses to each of these likely reactions, which I'm authorized to share if necessary. The moment we walked into the main conference room, the atmosphere became electric with tension. Marcus immediately stood up, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. "This is unacceptable," he declared, his lawyer's voice cutting through the silence. "There are clear grounds for challenging this will based on undue influence and diminished capacity. No rational person would leave their entire estate to someone who has consistently rejected family values and responsibilities." My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, honey, what did you say to Grandma Rose? What did you do to make her think we didn't love you?" Linda stepped forward, her business instincts kicking in despite the emotional chaos. "There has to be a way to contest this." Rose couldn't have been thinking clearly. This goes against everything she believed about family and tradition. I looked around the room at these people who had shaped my entire life, who had made me question my worth and my place in the family for years, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about inheritance or money. This was about validation, recognition, and the power to finally speak my truth without fear of being dismissed or excluded. "She was thinking perfectly clearly," I said quietly, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Rose saw exactly who each of us really is, and she made her decision based on our actions, not our claims about family loyalty." The silence that followed my words was deafening. For the first time in my life, I had my family's complete, undivided attention, and the power dynamic that had defined our relationships for decades was completely reversed. Marcus, who had always been the family spokesperson, seemed incapable of formulating a response. My parents stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Linda's business facade cracked, revealing genuine shock underneath. "You want to talk about family values and responsibilities?" I continued, my voice gaining strength from years of suppressed hurt and frustration. "Let's talk about how you excluded me from family photos because you were embarrassed by my relationship. Let's discuss how you dismissed my career as playing social worker while I was helping people navigate the same immigration system that allowed our grandmother to build this empire in the first place." Marcus finally found his voice, though it carried none of his usual confident authority. "Sarah, you have to understand, we were trying to protect the family's reputation. Your choices, your lifestyle, they reflect on all of us." "My lifestyle?" Emma spoke up for the first time, her physician's training evident in her calm, measured tone. "You mean my relationship with someone who loves and supports your daughter? Or do you mean Sarah's work helping families stay together, which somehow reflects poorly on a family built by an immigrant?" Jennifer, who had remained silent until now, looked up with tears in her eyes. "We never meant to make you feel unwelcome, Sarah. We just thought. We hoped you would eventually see that there were other paths, more traditional choices that would be easier for everyone." Easier for everyone? I felt 28 years of diplomatic silence cracking open. It would have been easier for me to pretend to be someone I'm not? To hide my relationship, change my career, and smile quietly while you all decided what kind of person was worthy of being called family. My father removed his glasses again, cleaning them obsessively while he spoke. Your grandmother was always too sentimental about your work with those people. We thought it was just a phase, that you'd grow out of wanting to save everyone and focus on building something for yourself. Those people? The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Dad, those people are families just like Rose was when she came here with nothing. They're working multiple jobs, learning English, trying to build better lives for their children. How is helping them not building something important? Linda stepped forward, her business instincts apparently overriding her emotional shock. Sarah, be realistic here. Even if Rose left you everything, you don't have the experience to manage restaurant chains and property holdings. This inheritance comes with serious financial responsibilities. Maybe we can work out an arrangement where Marcus handles the business aspects while you focus on whatever charitable projects interest you. The condescension in her voice was breathtaking. Even now, faced with the reality of Rose's decision, Linda couldn't imagine that I might be capable of handling significant responsibilities. You still don't get it, do you? I looked around the room at faces that had become increasingly foreign to me over the years. Rose didn't leave me this inheritance because she was sentimental or confused. She left it to me because she trusted me to continue the work she actually cared about, not just the work that looked impressive on paper. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat gently. If I may, there are some additional details in Rose's final instructions that address these specific concerns. He opened another folder and pulled out a thick document. Rose spent considerable time planning for the transition of her business operations to Sarah. She arranged for a team of experienced managers to handle day-to-day operations while Sarah learns the systems. She also established detailed protocols for maintaining employment and continuing the community support programs. Marcus's face went from pale to flushed. Community support programs? What community support programs? The ones Rose funded for the past 15 years, Mr. Peterson replied matter-of-factly. Immigration legal aid, English language classes, small business loans for restaurant workers wanting to start their own enterprises, emergency financial assistance for families facing deportation. Rose allocated approximately 30% of her annual profits to these programs. The room fell silent again as my family processed this information. All their assumptions about Rose's business model, about her priorities, about what made her successful, were being systematically dismantled. She never told us about any of that, my mother whispered. She told Sarah, Mr. Peterson replied simply. During their weekly dinners. Rose considered these programs to be the most important aspect of her legacy, and Sarah was the only family member who expressed interest in understanding them. I watched comprehension dawn on Marcus's face as he realized the full scope of what he'd lost. This wasn't just about inheriting wealth, it was about inheriting a mission, a purpose, a continuation of Rose's actual values rather than just her assets. But why? My father asked, his voice breaking slightly. Why would she do this to us? We loved her. We took care of her. You took care of her finances, I replied, surprising myself with the gentleness in my voice despite everything. You managed her medical appointments and researched senior living facilities. You brought the grandchildren to visit and made sure she had everything she needed materially. But you never took care of her heart. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand, giving me strength to continue. Rose used to tell me stories about her early days in America, about the discrimination she faced, about the other immigrants who helped her when she had nothing. She said those experiences taught her that success without compassion was just elaborate selfishness. You all saw her restaurants and properties as evidence of how well she'd assimilated into American capitalism. But she saw them as tools for lifting up the next generation of people who needed help. The weight of years of misunderstanding settled over the room like a heavy blanket. My family had spent so much energy judging my choices that they'd never bothered to understand Rose's actual values or recognize that my work aligned perfectly with her deepest beliefs. Sarah, Marcus said finally, his voice stripped of its usual authority, what happens now? I looked at each of them, these people who had raised me, shaped me, and ultimately pushed me away, and felt something I hadn't expected, not triumph, but sadness. This victory felt hollow because it came at the cost of family relationships that could have been beautiful if they'd been built on acceptance instead of conditions. Now we figure out how to move forward, I said quietly. Rose didn't do this to punish you forever. She did it to force all of us to confront the truth about how we've been treating each other. The question is whether we can learn from this, or whether her death will be the final break in our family. Linda wiped tears from her eyes, her business persona finally cracking completely. We failed her, didn't we? We failed you too. You failed to see us, Emma said gently. Both of you. You created a version of Sarah in your minds that didn't match reality, and you created a version of Rose that didn't match her actual priorities. Then you made decisions based on those false versions. My mother stood up suddenly, crossing the room to where I sat. For a moment, I thought she might try to embrace me, but instead she stopped just in front of my chair, her hands hovering uncertainly in the air. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words barely audible. I'm so sorry, Sarah. We thought we were protecting the family, but we were protecting our own comfort instead. We were protecting our own assumptions about what success should look like. It was the first genuine apology I'd ever received from her, and it broke something open in my chest that I'd been holding closed for years. 6 months later, I'm sitting in Rose's former office above her original restaurant, looking out at the same street view she'd shown me in her final video message. The transition has been challenging, overwhelming, and occasionally terrifying, but also deeply fulfilling in ways I never could have imagined. The inheritance came with exactly the responsibilities Rose had promised, and the power to create change on a scale I'd only dreamed about. The restaurants now employ 43 immigrants in various stages of their citizenship journey, offering not just jobs, but pathways to advancement and business ownership. We've established a formal mentorship program where experienced employees help newcomers navigate everything from English classes to small business loans. 3 former dishwashers now own their own food trucks, funded through Rose's microloan program that I've expanded significantly. The affordable housing properties Rose owned have become models for immigrant-friendly rental policies. We provide translation services, flexible lease terms for families with uncertain immigration status, and connections to legal aid resources. The waiting list is 6 months long, but every family who moves in knows they're not just renting an apartment, they're joining a community designed to support their success. The legal aid funding has tripled under my management, supporting not just individual immigration cases, but also policy advocacy and community education programs. Emma has started volunteering her medical skills at our community health clinics, creating a comprehensive support network that addresses the interconnected challenges immigrants face. But perhaps the most surprising development has been the gradual healing within my own family. It started with my mother, who began volunteering at our English language classes after that confrontational day in Mr. Peterson's office. She was awkward at first, clearly uncomfortable with her own privilege and her previous attitudes, but the immigrant women in the classes responded to her genuine effort to help with patience and kindness that transformed her perspective entirely. My father took longer to come around, but eventually started helping with tax preparation services for restaurant workers during filing season. His accounting background proved invaluable for families navigating their first tax returns as documented workers, and I watched him discover the same satisfaction I'd always found in helping people access opportunities they'd earned but couldn't navigate alone. Even Linda has found her place in Rose's true legacy, using her business expertise to help our microloan recipients develop solid business plans and financial management skills. She admitted to me recently that helping someone open their first business was more rewarding than any corporate deal she'd ever closed. Marcus took the longest to accept the new reality, spending several months consulting with attorneys about possible challenges to the will before finally acknowledging that Rose's decision was legally unassailable and probably morally justified. His pride was deeply wounded, but Jennifer surprised everyone by becoming one of our most effective advocates, using her medical connections to expand our health services and her social network to raise additional funding for our programs. The family dinners we have now are different from anything we experienced before Rose's death. They're smaller, more honest, and centered around the work we're all doing rather than achievements we're trying to impress each other with. Emma is included naturally, not as an outsider being tolerated, but as a valued member of our evolving family structure. We talk about the families we've helped, the challenges we're facing in our programs, and the ways we're all learning to live up to Rose's example. Last month, Marcus brought me a legal brief he'd prepared pro bono for one of our asylum cases, offering his expertise without fanfare or expectation of praise. My parents have started hosting holiday dinners for restaurant families whose extended relatives are still in other countries, creating new traditions that honor both Rose's memory and the reality of our community's needs. The financial success of Rose's businesses has actually increased under our expanded mission. Customers are drawn to restaurants that are transparently committed to fair labor practices and community investment. The properties maintain high occupancy rates because word spreads quickly through immigrant communities about landlords who treat tenants with dignity and respect. Our reputation for integrity has become our most valuable business asset. But beyond the measurable successes, there's something deeper that Rose's revenge accomplished. She forced all of us to confront the difference between performing family loyalty and actually living it. She showed my family that their assumptions about worthiness and gratitude were not just wrong but cruel, and she gave them the opportunity to choose growth over defensiveness in response to that revelation. The inheritance was never really about punishing them. It was about creating consequences that would force everyone to examine their values and make conscious choices about who they wanted to be going forward. Some families might have been destroyed by such a dramatic revelation, but Rose knew us well enough to bet that we had the capacity for growth if we were forced to face our failures honestly. As I finish writing this story, I keep thinking about that conversation Rose and I had in the hospital when she told me to trust the process. At the time, I thought she was just talking about her recovery or her medical care. I had no idea she was orchestrating the most elaborate lesson in family dynamics and social justice I could have imagined. Her revenge wasn't just about giving me the resources to continue her work, it was about teaching all of us what real gratitude looks like. Not the performative gratitude my family had expected from me for being allowed to exist in their space, but the active gratitude that shows up in how we treat people who are vulnerable, struggling, or different from us. Now I'm curious about your own experiences with family dynamics and justice. Have you ever been in a situation where someone underestimated you because of choices you made that didn't fit their expectations? Have you witnessed moments where people's true characters were revealed through crisis or conflict? What does family loyalty mean to you when it conflicts with standing up for what's right? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Stories like this only have power when they connect with real experiences and real people. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales about karma, justice, and the complicated ways families can both wound and heal each other. And if you know someone who's struggling with family acceptance or feeling like they don't belong because they've chosen principle over conformity, please share this story with them. Sometimes we all need reminders that being true to our values, even when it costs us acceptance, can ultimately lead to more authentic relationships and more meaningful success than we ever imagined possible. Rose's final lesson was that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. She didn't just punish my family for their behavior, she created conditions that allowed all of us to become better versions of ourselves. That's the kind of legacy worth inheriting and the kind of story worth sharing. Thank you for joining me on this journey through family drama, unexpected inheritance, and the sweet satisfaction of justice served. Life has a funny way of teaching us exactly the lessons we need, often through the people we least expect to be our teachers.